Mr. Tsiamis, you have actually been involved in today's panel, the European emissions trading system, the carbon emissions price tag for shipping. Now, the question is, though, what exactly is happening when shipping is actually looking for capital? Is this something that the shipping can actually have access to right now?
Actually, the answer is straightforward, is yes, and this is happening as of this year. And this is the dimension I contributed to this panel today. As of this year, the shipping sector has access to EU funding in order to green the fleets with new technologies, with innovative technologies. The dimension I introduced is that ETS is not about obligations only. It's also about opportunities. And the opportunities are coming from the financing that the European Union provides to the shipping sector in order to adapt to the ETS requirements.
Going green, however, can be quite expensive, if you like. And the question is there a return in going green, especially when we talk about shipping?
Absolutely. This is the logic of the European Union when it is integrating new sectors to the EU regulatory framework. It provides targets, it provides obligations, but it provides also incentives. And the logic behind is that I understand that you have to follow some obligations in order to adapt, but I'm providing you also the incentives to do so. It is indeed an expensive process. It is a long process. However, you have to start from somewhere. And this is an opportunity which a lot of companies today in the European Union takes advantage of. And why not the shipping sector not to take advantage as well?
Is there a timetable for the shipping industry to go green? Because we had the IMO setting the standards, and we now see that there has also already been a big ship which is actually running on electricity.
There are targets. The first, I would say, deadline is 2027. The ultimate deadline is 2050. I understand it is a long process. However, the tools are available for the shipping companies to initiate the process. As I described in the panel, there are specific steps to follow. Assess your requirements in order to green your fleets, identify the right technologies, design the appropriate projects, and then apply for funding.
But then again, it's a question of actually finding the right technology. And as until now, we don't have specifics as to this particular technology. So this is a question that needs to be addressed on a European level.
Indeed, and I should highlight here that for some years now, even though the shipping sector was not included in the EU funding process, the European Union invested a lot on technology providers to develop technologies for the shipping sector. Now there are mature technologies, or at the demonstrator level, and there are multiple millions of euros. This year only we have 800 million aiming the shipping sector in order to select the technologies they prefer and then to integrate them into their fleets. I'm talking to the shipping companies almost every day, and I'm talking also to technology providers across the European Union, and I can assure you that the technologies are there. What we need to have, and this was my last message to the audience today, is to dare to change.
Now, is this your first time you're actually participating in the Capital Link Shipping Forum?
It is my first time, and it makes sense because, as I said, until last year, the shipping sector was excluded from financing from the European Union. And this was a complaint from the shipping sector, by the way. As of this year, the shipping sector, of course, has to follow the ETS process, but at the same time, they have the opportunity to access EU funding. That's why I'm here. That's my job.
Would you like to make a comment on the shipping forum itself?
The forum is quite successful. I see a full room and also high level. I see interest in the side talks. I can see the concern of the shipping sector to, first of all, to apply the processes of the ETS, but also they are keen to green and to innovate. And this is a very encouraging message. Congratulations to the organizers.
Mr. Stampedakis, targeting net zero, is this achievable nowadays, given the fact that we have the crisis in the Red Sea area, and we also have to bear in mind that all the seafarers need to take a longer route. So how does this add up?
That's a very interesting question. Okay, as a first response, yes, meeting net zero it is an achievable target. However, it doesn't contain just a single solution. Adding on this, the increased mileage that a vessel needs to trade in order to reach from east to west or vice versa, that makes it more challenging. However, technology developers, we are working 24/7 in order to meet those strict targets and those very challenging targets. And I'm pleased to say that at least for the short-term solutions, for targets meeting 2030 to 2035, there are already available solutions out there which can support the young fleet we currently operate to meet those targets.
Now, talking about targeting net zero, though, we have to also bear in mind, though, the alternative fuels and the technology that is available. So, given the fact that you said that we can actually meet the target set for 2030, what kind of fuel do you think that we need to actually use in those newly built ships?
That's an easy reply, but it's very difficult to achieve. A carbon zero fuel, this is what we need. Is this available at the moment? No, it's not. There are a lot of fuels at the moment like LNG, methanol, ammonia, which actually are covering this gap for the time being. However, we see that green hydrogen should be the way forward, since this is a carbon neutral fuel.
Is the technology available, though, for those ships in order to use hydrogen, given the fact that it actually takes too much space on board the ship?
No, the technology nowadays is not available. That's why I made the reference that for the time being, LNG and methanol or even ammonia are more promising and feasible than hydrogen. However, the technology providers, we have very quick reactions. So we are able to work in order to meet the standards, in order to be able to accommodate all the difficulties on handling and burning hydrogen in order to meet those net zero targets.
It's not the first time that you're actually participating in the Capital Link forums, but would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay, it is an impressive event. It is an event that year after year, instead of getting more tired, it's getting more viable, it's getting more alive, and it attracts more and more attention. The way that the organizers are approaching the needs of the shipping throughout the years is what keeps it so alive and so viable.
Dr. Kokarakis, today you have spoken about the effect of regulations on ship supply. Is there so much regulation in place which actually works as a hindrance, if you like, in shipbuilding and the shipping industry itself?
It seems that shipping is indeed overregulated. I'm talking about the global and the regional regulations, because we have, besides the global, we have also local, what I would say local or national regulations. Regulations are never enough. Everything is regulated and people ask for them. Like, for example, the advent of alternative fuels at this moment lacks the appropriate regulations to be installed in a vessel. And this is important from the standpoint of environmental protection and safety. So I would say that we can never say regulations are enough. We always need the regulations to guide our designers on how to apply and establish the new technologies and the new alternative cleaner fuels.
So what do you think are the effects of the regulation on the shipping industry itself and the ship supply as well?
I believe that the main driver of new buildings is the regulations, because people try to comply with those, and a lot of times it's very difficult, almost impossible, financially impossible, to retrofit an existing vessel. So we expect a flooding of new buildings. Besides the high price of new buildings at this moment, we expect very big orders in the near and immediate future.
You have actually used the word retrofit in current vessels. The question is there enough supply as well as shipyards to actually accommodate those needs, bearing in mind that we have over-regulation?
Yeah, this is indeed the problem. The available slots are not infinite. There is a limited number of slots, and we have, in my profession, in my experience, every day live, we see people that, although they have strong desire to build, they cannot find the appropriate slot within the time that they want. So there is a lack of shipbuilding capacity at the present.
Do you actually have an estimate of the time frame regarding the newly built ships?
It is a critical point, because ships live about 25 years. Today we're close to 2025, plus 25, we go to 2050. 2050, according to the revised IMO strategy of 2023, everything will be zero greenhouse gas emissions. It appears that this is a very difficult target, and this, whatever is built today, will affect the landscape of the shipping in even at the ground zero in 2050.
Is there a way out for the shipbuilders and the ship owners of this dead end?
The best way out, as we can surmise, is to retrofit to the extent possible. Retrofitting can be more expensive than starting from zero. But depends. If you have an older vessel, most likely it is not worth it to retrofit. It is going to go for scrap. Definitely a vessel that will burn fossil fuel, if it is not combined with a carbon capsule technology, inevitably will end up in the scrapping yards of the Indian Peninsula.
Let's just focus on the Greek fleet. Is there a time frame for the newly built ships owned by Greek ship owners?
What we experience with the Greek ship owners, we see some large fleets, large Greek fleets, and I will mention Mr. Prokopiou, who has a very ambitious shipbuilding program with over 66 vessels, Mr. Economou, Mr. Marinakis, and Mr. Prokopiou, for example, goes with fossil fuels. He said, my instinct tells me that in 2050, and he may be right, fossil fuels are going to be still around. I believe his hope relies on the development of extensive carbon capsule technology, which is a hope for the legacy of fossil fuels. Others, like Marinakis and Economou, go with the so-called dual fuel that can burn alternative fuels. But I would like to make a comment. If we are going to burn methanol or ammonia or LNG, if it is not going to be green fuel, then better burn heavy fuel oil or crude oil even.
Finally, your comment on the Capital Link Shipping Forum.
Capital Link brings around a very impressive host of experts from all over the world. It's an international event, and it is an honor for all of us to participate and be part of it wherever it takes place.
Targeting net zero. This is a goal that is actually set for the whole of the shipping industry. The question is, how can we achieve that? Because there are many alternative fuels, there is no specific technology as such, and we also have the overregulation up to 2050 that most of the ship owners, if not all of them, need to abide by.
So, as opposed to replacing fuels and enhancing engines and looking on expensive hardware solutions, Orca AI thinks that we first need to deal with the seafarers on board to provide them with the correct training, education, and understand better the implications of their navigation and operations and the relationship between that and emissions reduction. So here comes data, connectivity, artificial intelligence that can look on trends and benchmarks and anomalies, highlight specific emissions-related KPIs, present those KPIs both to the fleet management, to the operations, but also to the seafarers on board, and create common KPIs for the entire industry to track and evaluate themselves. And this can be achieved both by putting new technologies on board, gather evidence from the ships, utilizing existing infrastructure such as connectivity, and adoption of multiple teams working together within the shipping organizations. And it is the role of the technology vendors to produce what I'll call tangible, economical benefits for these organizations to adopt technology.
Now, bearing in mind that we are actually targeting net zero, we have the Ukraine war still going on. We also have another crisis in the Red Sea, and that is actually working as an obstacle in achieving the target net zero, considering that most of the ships need to actually go around the African continent in order to get to their points, the destinations. So how do you think this can work together, both achieving net zero as well as sustaining green effect on shipping industry?
So I think what happens in both Ukraine and the Red Sea are global issues. First of all, in terms of the regulation and the destination, it should take into consideration macro events such as this. And these kind of events should and needs to be handled by the industry as a whole and to come out as an outcry, as a challenge on the way to actually meet the sustainability goals. Other than that, we can and we should adopt technologies that can help seafarers feel safer when navigating in dangerous waters. For example, with Orca AI, we utilize advanced computer vision on board. We can use this computer vision to detect, track, and classify airborne targets, giving adequate time to seafarers to seek shelter on board, gather evidence for insurance purposes, and basically reduce the anxiety of our seafarers when they traverse these dangerous waters. These solutions, unfortunately, does not exist today in any other tools like the radar or the AIS. But computer vision can dramatically reduce the anxiety of these crews by providing them early notification and action to try and meet both the sustainability goals, but also, of course, reduce the costs of the operators.
Finally, would you like to make a comment on the Capital Link Shipping Forum?
Honestly speaking, I was not expecting such a big event and an exclusive event as I can see here. I can see a lot of colleagues, but also meet new companies, CEOs, ship owners, and many people gathering together towards the future of this industry in terms of sustainability and emissions. I'm very happy to see that most of the shipping companies are happy to adapt and to change and to embrace new technologies. And myself personally and the entire team at Orca AI, we actually work with most of the owners here and the CEOs here So it's very happy to finally see everyone in person. Personally, for myself, I come from Tel Aviv, Israel. We came from kind of a war zone, and I'm happy to see that the world continues to look into the future of decarbonization and green shipping. It is a super important role. And this specific event, I think, will be an interesting pivotal moment in time where we see more and more adoption of technologies on board and openness from ship owners. So thank you for having me.
Ms. Hesse, you've been a part of the EU Emissions Trading Systems panel, and the main topic was the carbon emissions price tag for shipping. So do these two meet with each other, or do they actually go to the opposite directions? Price and the emissions that actually apply to the shipping industry?
The emissions, unfortunately, in shipping are still going up because international trade is growing and we don't have the fuel of the future yet. The price for carbon, the mandatory price for carbon in the European Union has recently gone down, but it's expected to rise again. So I think in the medium term to long term perspective, they're both growing in the same direction.
Now, this increase, if you like, where does it go? Does it actually being relayed to the customers, to the end customer, or is it being absorbed by the ship owners?
Ship owners will forward this cost to charterers, who will forward this cost to subcharterers, cargo owners, who will in the end make the consumer pay for it. It's like with any other tax actually that we see in a value chain. But everyone needs to make sure that they get this accounting right, and this is what we do and what our product and my panel contribution was about.
Carbon emissions, though, they are actually a big issue for the European Union, whereas for the rest of the world, it doesn't seem to be the main idea, the main issue. Would you like to comment on that?
I do think it's the main issue also for the rest of the world. So last year we've seen the International Maritime Organization really move on this topic. They have now agreed on reaching carbon zero around 2050, so that's a big step forward, and we've already seen the carbon intensity indicator regulation coming along in 23. So I think the EU is a front runner here, but other regions and the global level are following suit because everyone luckily takes this issue very seriously.
But how do you think this will actually affect the newly built ships? Because right now we are facing alternative technologies, but not one specific, or if you like, a unique technology that will fit all.
Very true, and that's, I think, one of the big challenges here, that the industry wants to get to carbon zero, needs to get to carbon zero, but the technology path is not clear. So you actually have high investment uncertainty, and we've heard from larger panelists or larger companies on the panels today that they place bets on certain technologies. I think smaller owners cannot really afford that. So it's also about managing an existing fleet through the transition, doing retrofits. So these things are also very, very important.
How do you think that the EU emissions trading system and the requirements that go with the carbon emissions will actually affect the shipping industry? What will be the effect of it?
Well, they increase operational expenditure on any given voyage into the EU or within the EU. So they put an incentive on performing these voyages in a more efficient way. In order to stay competitive, when you are a supplier of a ship, you are incentivized to invest to make that ship more efficient and thus more competitive compared to other suppliers of ships. So this is the main incentive, putting a carbon tax on carbon and thus making alternative fuels, alternative technology more beneficial for owners.
If you were to make a forecast or a projection, would you say that the carbon emissions price tag will actually push those who cannot afford it out of business and maybe even increase the fleets of those who can actually really make it?
That's a very tough question. I think also smaller owners and managers and charterers and those operating older ships can survive this if they get their strategy straight and if they have a very good internal process to manage the cost and forward them in time. But on the other hand, obviously, this is getting very complicated more and more, so there might be a push for consolidation in the industry. But you know, they are voices that have seen consolidation coming in shipping for decades, and it hasn't really come. So the small independent ship owner has been there and is still there. We'll see.
But what's your gut feeling, though? Where do you think we are heading?
I think towards larger organizations in the longer run, because they can better afford the risk in investments. Yeah.
Finally, would you like to comment on the Capital Link Shipping Forum?
It's a great forum, actually. I've joined previous forums, and I'm now for the first time in Athens. And it's huge. There's such a high turnout. It's such a dynamic atmosphere. Everyone is really interested in exchanging views, and so I think it's a very great platform to interact with the industry.
Mr. Minister, today we're actually running the Capital Link Shipping Forum with the main topic being sailing into high seas. One of the topics, though, has been the EU emissions, the trading system, as well as how the over-regulation of the shipping industry may affect the development from now on, both on a Greek level as well as a global level. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, first of all, I would like to say thanks to the organizers for this kind invitation. And as I said in my speech, this event, this forum, already became an emblematic event for the shipping industry. About ETS, because it is a controversial issue, no doubt. Everybody in Europe, in all council, with all European ministers, we talk about this. I strongly believe, and this is what I heard from an excellent civil servant, Mrs. Fotini Ioannidou, that we already accepted the implementation of this new European direction, but at the same time, we are ready to see some aspects of this, and maybe we reconsider or we review about the clear implementation in 2025. I'm not ready to say more at this moment because I have to safeguard, secure my role as a former European Commissioner who is already started a sort of dialogue among my colleagues, ministers in Europe. But I really believe that we have to see through this year all aspects, and we have to be flexible to reconsider this really ETS framework.
So Tirogalas, it seems that these times are actually quite hard in actually making investments in shipping, or is that so?
You're absolutely right. It is, of course, as we say, it's good times in shipping, which for a new investment, it makes it more difficult to identify and deploy capital in. We are doing so in a few different ways, a few different mandates with regards to what the investors want, because we're an investment manager, so our mandate is effectively to deploy the capital of the investors. We are specialized in the industry, and this is what we know, this is what we do. We've been doing this for 40 years. And what we see is that perhaps instead of just what the opportunity is what does the capital want to invest in? And today we see that a lot in, of course, what I would call the flavor of the month being green transition and alternative fuels that will try to solve the puzzle of decarbonization, emissions reduction, etc., etc.
So when we talk about shipping, it's not necessarily the vessels itself, but it could be something else like what you suggested before, the technology that goes with sustainability or green and the reducing the emissions, essentially.
Absolutely. So what we've done until now, Tufton is well known as an asset-backed investor. However, as part of what we plan to do in the next 10 years is we are about to launch a new vertical within our investment portfolio, which is going to be venture capital. And with that venture capital investment portfolio, the idea is to invest in digitalizing or further decarbonizing the shipping industry for, pre-seed or stage A, stage B, etc., depending on where the company is. And that can be both on the software improvements that one can expect, or, as you say, hardware improvements, whether that's energy-saving devices or other.
Now, can you actually think of any challenges that the shipping industry is now facing right now, as, for example, the Ukrainian war or even the Red Sea crisis? These are some major challenges, and I would just like to ask you, how did this affect the shipping and the investment environment, if you like, in that particular industry?
Well, it makes it, of course, more challenging, although one needs to remember that shipping as an industry is always resilient and it has to face adversity. And although it is a learning game versus vis-a-vis investors with regards to what does it mean what happened in Ukraine, what does it mean what's happening in the Middle East, what does it mean that we cannot cross the Suez Canal. At the same time, as you probably know, disruption in shipping is good. So once someone gets comfortable with the idea that there is disruption in the shipping space and it becomes more challenging from an operating standpoint, at the same time, from a profitability standpoint and from a return, what is happening is fortunately, unfortunately, a positive to the actual shipping investor.
Do actually investors and ship owners look at shipping the same way nowadays?
I don't think so. I mean, everybody wants to make money ultimately. That's the reason why people invest in shipping. That's the reason why people invest in general. I think the difference between investors and the people that we represent is that whether they identify at a specific point in time a certain opportunity within the shipping space, or whether they want to diversify their portfolio, and for an allocation standpoint, they say, we're going to put X amount of capital within shipping, their mindset is, this is not forever, and this is something that we will do probably for the next 7 years, 10 years. That's a long-term investor. Ship owners are, of course, this is their business, this is what they do, this is their life. So they're in for the long run. And while we, as the investment manager in shipping, are also in for the long run, our investor base tends to change over time in order to satisfy what is interesting and attractive from an investment standpoint at that point in time. Whereas ship owners, their goal is to effectively, run shipping companies, invest in shipping, and do that generation after generation.
Now, you being in the investment, especially in the shipping industry, what would you identify as opportunities for investments?
So so I've been on the shipowning side because I worked for a ship owner for a really long time. And I think the benefit is having seen both sides of the equation. One can, have a more prudent approach in terms of what the investor wants, what are the things that you want to avoid, what are the things that you should be investing in. So from right now, if one asked us which asset class we like and in which part of the sectors we would like to increase our exposure, I would probably say that chemical tankers is a space that we really like. We see there is no supply in any kind of scenarios that you run on the demand side. It is pretty evident that it's very difficult to build a negative case, which is usually not what you come across. We like, sort of from a value appreciation potential, the small bulker space as well. And then we like, for the impact that we can have in terms of improving and reducing CO2 emissions, anything that is related to, call it carbon capture, burning alternative fuels, dual fuels, any kind of big tickets that would actually do good for the industry as well and the environment.
So if I'm getting this correctly, the magic words in the shipping industry is basically finding out what the future lies ahead, what the future holds in terms of the unique fuel that will make the change and the transition into being green.
Yeah, but I think it's good luck figuring that out for all of us. I think a few things are going to be tested, and it will take us a little bit of time before we can get to what we all, wish for, which is zero carbon emissions. But while we get there, it's always good to sort of transition through things that have been tried and tested and proven.
Now, Mr. Tirogalas, would you like to make a comment on the Greek Shipping Forum here in Athens?
No, I think it's it's 14th year for this shipping forum. Nicolas and the team have done a fantastic job in bringing together. I mean, what you would typically say in a different environment, it's a sold out without being sold out, because there's like an overflow of people. So it's a fantastic occasion for people to get together, and I think Capital Link has done a fantastic job in developing this over the years.
Dr. Tsakos, today you have been awarded a great award from the Capital Link Forum for the 30 years of TEN, a company that's actually counting already 30 years in the New York Stock Exchange. What lies ahead?
Well, as I said, we're not ready to retire, so I made it clear to Mr. Bornozis that we accept this award as a milestone for our 30 years, and we're still a long way to go, growing the fleet, modernizing the fleet, making it much more environmentally friendly, and of course making it profitable for the shareholders and paying a continuous dividend as we've done for the past 30 years.
Dr. Tsakos, during the award ceremony, you've mentioned 5 keywords that made you successful. One of those was diversity and the other one was flexibility. Would you like to comment on that? Because we are in an ongoing changing environment, especially in the shipping industry, bearing in mind the crisis in the Red Sea right now.
Yes, well, diversification, and of course right now it's much more popular to call it diversity, we do not focus just in one energy carrier type. Other companies have a different strategy and they're very successful too. So there are companies that focus just on VLCCs, others just on product carriers, Suezmaxes, other companies that do LNGs. We have the luxury, by keeping the company just all over the energy spectrum, to be able to choose the best deals every time. So we're never forced to do, let's say, an LNG deal when the market is not appropriate for that. We can do a conventional ship or we can do an ice class vessel. So that's what we call diversification. It has worked for us very, very well for 30 years so far. Then flexibility, you need to follow, times are changing. Our industry with technology and AI is changing the whole time, and we have to be always on our feet, eager to adapt, but without losing our focus, because that was another, our focus, which is to transport safely, environmentally friendly goods and keep our seafarers, first of all, satisfied and safe.
If you were to make a projection as to where the shipping industry is going in the next 20 or 30 years, bearing in mind the green and sustainable policies that are actually being applied right now, what do you think the main factors would be that you really need to consider as a ship owner who is about to build new ships?
Well, I believe that other than technology, which is ever changing and it's something we cannot really control ourselves, is the so far lack of human factor for the ships. Because you can build a very expensive state-of-the-art vessel, but if you do not have the right people to run it, it's like having a 380 and not having a pilot to fly it. So I think for us the human factor is going to be very challenging, because less and less people decide to go to sea for their own reasons.
A quarter of the global fleet, the merchant fleet around the world, belongs to Greek ship owners. Yet there are many challenges that need to be taken into consideration, and I would just like to ask you to make a forecast, if you like, whether the Greek fleet will actually become bigger or will it actually shrink?
Well, I think it is an oxymoron that a country of the size of Greece, which is 11 million people, a very small decimal point of the world population, is controlling 25% of seaborne transportation. I believe that it can maintain its position. We are against giants, I mean, literally giants like China and India, with huge populations, people that can go to sea. But I think tradition and Greek intuition is going to keep us, and the young generation, I see them more and more interested in following the business.
Finally, a piece of advice to the wannabe ship owners.
Well, I mean, you always need wannabe ship owners, startups, in order for the business to be healthy. If you do not have new people entering seafaring, ship owning, you're in a stale situation. So I think, as long as they know what they're doing, as know that they should not take more risks than they can handle, I think we need those.
Mr. Salerno, the shipping industry is actually undergoing many and different challenges. One of them is the geopolitical challenges. The other one is obviously abiding by the regulatory framework set by the European Union, as well as the sources of fuel that needs to be used in order to achieve the goals and targets set by the green policy. So, putting all this together, how far do you think we are from achieving those goals, and what is actually the future of the shipping industry in a global scale?
It's a very simple question, of course. Let's say one thing, shipping is a global industry, and it has been the first global industry in history. And therefore, whatever happens in the world, especially these geopolitical instabilities, is affecting shipping. Affecting means changing things. That means that shipping has to adapt to the changing environment. A changing environment is also the environment that obliges us, because we need to survive on this planet, to reduce the carbon emission and to become carbon neutral by 2050. And therefore, shipping is also involved in this transition. That, let's not forget, it's a transition, so it will take years. It's not a switchover from the today world to a perfect world. It will take some years. Now, as far as geopolitical instability, shipping is adapting to it by changing routes. Of course, this is going also to change the price of the service that shipping is doing, because especially if you are lengthening these routes and you cannot more use the Suez Canal, vessels will take 15 days more to deliver their goods, and therefore there will be less availability of ships to transport the same amount of goods. So it will affect the cost of transport, the price of transport, but is continuing to serve the community, because shipping is the way of serving the community around the world. As far as the transition is concerned, of course we are working with a very difficult topic, because shipping is the most difficult, the most hard to abate industry, is even harder to abate than the steel industry, than the cement industry, because ships are the most of the time far from the place where they can find the energy necessary to move and to operate. And so you need to have the right distribution of the right energy, because it's not only fuels, because if you speak of hydrogen, you are speaking of a mean of energy, but you need to have the right distribution in order to serve shipping, because shipping partly is a liner, so they know they go back and forth on a certain route, but part of the shipping is commanded by the need of commodities or of goods in a different place of the world, so they cannot foresee where they are going to refuel the ship. So, having said that, of course technology is working, and ship owners are working a lot on efficiency, and this is the best way of being green, because it is the only green energy is the one that you are not using. All the other energies are low carbon energies, but there is no an energy that is completely free from carbon. Shipping is working on many different options. For example, there will be the possibility to use synthetic fuels or biologic fuels, but also to use the hydrogen or maybe more easily ammonia, that is transporting the energy of hydrogen but in a much more easier way. There will be the possibility to use methanol if we will have green methanol, or another possibility is to use nuclear power, because nuclear is now making a lot of development in building small reactors, modular, which are completely enclosed and which have the size of a large engine of a vessel. So it's a possibility, and I think it's one of the best possibilities that we will have. But it will take time because we need to have acceptance from the community. It will be a change, and the shipping industry has to adapt to the needs of the environment, even if, let's not forget, that shipping is transporting more or less 90% of the goods of the world and is polluting for about 2% of the total pollution in terms of emission. But in any case, shipping is doing its part. How is going to affect? Of course, most probably this transition will not be free of charge. But what is important is that this extra cost is not so high that is jeopardizing the competitiveness of shipping towards different means of transport, because otherwise we are going to shoot in our feet. Because if we switch from shipping to a different mean of transport, we will pollute more, because shipping is the most energy efficiency way of transporting people, goods, whatever. So whatever is creating disadvantage to shipping compared to other means of transport is going to pollute the world. So it will be not, let's say, a party to this transition, but we must have the possibility to keep this cost within reasonable levels in order not to create for shipping a disadvantage compared to other means of transport.
Now, would you like to comment on the Greek Shipping Forum here in Athens?
Oh, it has been amazing. It's years. I am part of this industry since many years. If I tell you, it's 47 years that I am around in shipping. Really, in few cases I have seen something similar, and in the last years I have never seen a conference like this. Number of attendants, but more importantly, the level of attendance. We have had the most prominent personalities in shipping in the world here.
Mr. Antoniou, one of the key factors affecting the shipping industry is funding and sponsoring essentially the shipbuilding. Throughout the last 15 years, as well as the economic crisis, funding has been an issue, just looking for alternative sources of funding. Has that actually changed? And if so, where are we going and what lies ahead from now on?
Well, the market has evolved over the past 20, 30 years significantly, as the majority of the funding for the shipping industry used to come from mostly European universal banks. And that has changed. I mentioned earlier that the word Basel doesn't sound good to the ears of shipping bankers and ship owners, because since the introduction of the Basel rules, Basel 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., it has become more complicated and more restrictive to advance funds for specialized industries like shipping, like commodities, etc. As a result, we have seen a massive exodus of banks from the shipping finance industry, which is not going to stop. Our impression is that it will continue, and as a result, the industry needs to seek alternative ways of funding itself. We have identified this trend some time ago, which is why we decided to set up Neptune Maritime Leasing to do exactly that, offer leasing solutions to the funding issues of the shipping industry. And leasing solutions are flexible, are allowing owners to attract funds at a much higher loan-to-value ratio than traditional banks and are quick to market. So the underwriting capability that we have allows speed and predictability in decision making. Now, it's not a coincidence that if you take the example of the airline industry, you'll see that more than 50%, close to 60 maybe, of the airline industry is funded with and through leasing companies and leasing structures. We firmly believe that this will also be the path that the shipping industry is going to follow, and as a result, we expect leasing to be not an alternative, but a mainstream funding method for the majority of the ship owners.
Now, how do you think, though, that the issue of going green will affect ship owners in terms of both building new ships and especially securing this alternative funding that needs to come from a source that will guarantee a certain profit, a certain reward?
Look, there's no doubt that we're going through a crisis right now. There's a climate crisis. I was listening to the news in the TV the other day, and there were news about Andalusia having a tremendous, in Spain, a tremendous drought problem, and we're in the middle of the winter. So clearly, we need to take action. The world decided at COP28 in Dubai a few months ago to proceed with the decarbonization. It's very clear that the decision was to triple the amount of nuclear electricity production and renewable electricity production in the next 2 years. But tripling it means that there's going to be many more green electrons, which of course cannot be easily stored, and therefore we need to find ways to store it. And then we need to convert the green electrons to green molecules. That's where the decision about the green fuels comes into play. So there'll be massive progress in this area. But of course, the governments need to play a significant role in Europe as well, because in America, with the Inflation Reduction Act, in Saudi Arabia, they're taking very, very active steps to promote hydrogen production, for example. Europe is, although the intentions are there and the plan is there, the execution is a bit slow. In fact, I was in Davos a few weeks ago, and I heard there that only 7% of the hydrogen projects in Europe have reached the FID, final investment decision. And of course, this is not enough. We need to speed up. We need to make sure that the funds that are allocated for the production of green hydrogen are in fact dispersed. And as a result, that will allow the industry to move forward. I believe there's a great future for Greece in that space, not only because it has tremendous amounts of renewable energy through wind and solar energy, but also because we have the largest shipping industry definitely in the European Union that can play a pivotal role in the transportation of hydrogen in different forms, whether it's in liquid form or in gaseous form through hydrogen or ammonia or methanol, etc. So there's a lot at play here, and I think funds, alternative funds, are going to play an important role in the decarbonization of the fleet.
Now, finally, a comment on the Greek shipping forum in Athens.
It's the greatest. I love to be here. I've been here many times. And I want to thank Nicolas and Olga for putting it together an amazing event. Thank you.
Ms. Alatari, as a senior shipping analyst, what do you think the impact of the Red Sea disruption on shipping is?
Well, so far we've seen a severe effect on supply chains. Everything is driving up costs. It's starting to inflict pain on land and port logistics, and it's inflating freight rates. And this is all happening at a time when we're still dealing with the aftermath of the worst inflationary episode since the 70s. Each shipping market has been affected in its own way. Lignite containers, which is probably the sector which has seen the most diversion so far. We see that the larger segments have been most severely affected, although we start to see the knock-on effect on smaller segments as well. In terms of tankers, so far we see that all routes involving Red Sea passage are red hot, although there are other factors going on right now, for instance, seasonal demand weakness as we head into refinery maintenance season, and this is causing other routes, whether we talk about crude tankers or product tankers, to have actually come off since the beginning of the year. As for the dry bulk market, it's the least affected, at least in a direct manner, from all these disruptions, but sentiment has been lifted on the back of all these disruptions, and what's really key is that this situation in the Red Sea is piling up while we're still dealing with the worst drought in the Panama Canal since the 60s. So overall, ton miles in the dry bulk segment have also gone up by about 2%.
Now, having said that, though, is there any opportunity rising from this particular crisis in the Red Sea? Because we've seen that something similar happened back in 2 years, almost when the Ukrainian-Russian war started.
That's a very good analogy, actually, especially for the tanker market, which was mainly affected back when Russia invaded Ukraine. The common belief in the market today is that the market will manage to adjust much easier this time around, much more rapidly. People have already had to figure out a way to switch suppliers. They can manage to do that again. But what's really key when these geopolitical disruptions occur is the duration. And that, of course, is impossible to gauge. But what we know about shipping and geopolitical disruption is that the longer those disruptions persist, the more volatile markets are.
Obviously, talking about taking another route in order to reach the destination means extra costs. Will this be relayed to the end customer?
It remains to be seen. We're still quite early on from the start of these disruptions. It's only been a couple of months since we've had the first attacks on commercial ships. But if these disruptions do persist for quite a while, yes, we would expect to see that knock-on effect being passed on consumers once again.
Now, when we talk about ship owners, the main concern is the safety both of the seafarers as well as the vessels themselves. What are the measures, if you like, or the precautions that they need to take in order to protect those vessels moving in the wider Red Sea area?
Well, from armed guards on board, this is step number one.
Which is an extra cost.
Definitely, and it's, as you can imagine, it has gone through the moon. Ever since those attacks started, the demand for them shot up. Another thing which is quintessential is additional war risk insurance. Typical war risk insurance could be 0.1% of a ship's value. Nowadays it's gone up tenfold, 1% or even 1.5% in many cases. And we've even heard this week that some insurers are refusing coverage.
So there's going to be a hit-on effect in this case.
Of course, it just makes diversions necessary.
We concluded today the 14th annual Capital Link Greek Shipping Forum. I am very proud to say that, as Minister Stylianides mentioned, the Minister of Shipping of Greece, this forum has become an institution in the sense that every year it is a summit of the institutional and industry leadership of global shipping. Indeed, we had the privilege to have with us today those who are leading the critical decisions that shape the future of the industry. On one hand, we had the institutional leadership. We had the top regulators, the IMO Secretary General, Mr. Arsenio Dominguez. We had with us Ms. Fotini Ioannidou, who is the acting director at the European Union for Transport and Mobility. These are the top two regulators who are enacting regulation that impacts the shipping industry. Then we had the heads of the 4 major industry associations of BIMCO, Intertanko, Intercargo, and the International Chamber of Shipping. The heads of these 4 organizations, Mr. Paolo D'Amico, Nikos, Dimitri Fafalios, and Emanuele Grimaldi, are not only major institutional leaders, but also major ship owners in their own right. And they are working to put forward the requests for the industry in terms of regulation, safety, and a lot of other issues. Then we had the president of the Greek Ship Owners Union. Greece is the largest ship-owning nation in the world, with over 20% of the global fleet, and therefore the opinions of Greek shipping have particular gravitas. And of course, we had the Minister of Shipping, Mr. Stylianides. We also had with us the major bankers, the global heads of shipping of major banks, the heads of the major classification societies. So you had the elite of the industry, and the topics that were discussed are very specific. What are the major issues today for shipping? Regulation. We all need to ensure that regulation will be global and not regional. Then we have the major issue of green shipping. We have the new system that came in, the EU ETS. So how is this going to affect shipping? What are the alternative fuels, the alternative pathways towards decarbonization? Then the other topic that was discussed was obviously the access to capital, either on the banking side, the alternative financing side, or on the capital markets. Another major issue is what is happening in the Red Sea, geopolitics. And geopolitics that affect not only freight rates, but also the safety of the crews. And what is the industry doing about that? And we concluded our forum today with a panel with 5 major investors who have very significant presence in the shipping markets, both as owners of assets and owners of investments. And we also had the unique opportunity today to recognize Tsakos Energy Navigation and, of course, its founder, Dr. Nikos Tsakos, for achieving 30 years as a publicly listed company. It is the first and the oldest publicly listed entity, and in all those years, the company has grown from 4 vessels to 71 vessels today, tremendous growth, steady profitability, continuous dividend payments, but it is an achievement, a unique achievement, and we had the opportunity today to honor the company, and of course, behind the company stands a great founder and CEO. So all in all, I'm absolutely humbled that we have the opportunity to do this. We plan to continue doing this every year because at the end of the day, every year we have new issues, but the people who are trying to tackle those issues from a position of power tend to be the same. So having them come every year and give us the fresh look on what is happening is vitally important, and I'm absolutely humbled that we could do this today.